Good morning. Today's New Testament reading is from Philippians chapter 4, verses 1 through 9. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, my beloved. I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to be in the same mind in the Lord. Yes, and I ask you also, my loyal companions, help these women, for they have struggled beside me in the work of the gospel, together with Clement and the rest of my co-workers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Jesus Christ. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. Thanks be to God.
Amen.
Thank you, Sue. The gospel reading this morning is from the book of Matthew, chapter 22, verses 1 through 14. And this is the parable of the wedding banquet. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven is like a king who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants and said, 'Tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet.' But they paid no attention and went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, 'The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find.' So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, the bad as well as the good, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guests, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. He asked, 'How did you get in here without wedding clothes, friend?' The man was speechless. Then the king told the attendants, 'Tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen.' This is the gospel of our Lord.
Thanks be to God.
So did you know that you spend most of your day thinking? There's always something going through your mind, and you're always thinking about it. Right now, you're thinking about what I just said. Did you also know that the average person has 10,000 thoughts that they think about each day? Already, you've had over 1,000 thoughts since you got out of bed this morning, and you'll have at least another 9,000 before you go back to bed tonight. A lot of these 10,000 thoughts represent a choice that you make and a decision that you're going to think about. So what do you think about? Are there things that you think about always on a daily basis? To be honest, one thing that I think about is all the things that I have to get done each day. I wake up thinking about it, and I go to bed thinking about it. But I also think about the life that is given to me now by and through the grace of God. And my thought pattern is totally different than it ever used to be. Our thoughts certainly affect our attitudes and our moods. If we're listening and we're paying attention to God, we know that everything that He tells us is for our own good. He knows what makes us happy, and He knows what makes us miserable. When people are full of wrong thoughts, they are miserable. And I've learned from personal experience that miserable people usually end up making others miserable as well. Take, for instance, the parable in Matthew that I just read. Everybody seems pretty angry in this parable. The first set of guests that were invited and didn't show, they treated the king pretty miserably. And then the king became really distraught when he destroyed all of them and burned their city. Now, the king is God, and this does not fit the God that we know who is revealed by Jesus. This is a parable of judgment, but it may not be the judgment that we think that it is. What the king says about the first group of people when they didn't show up was, those invited were not worthy. So that would make us think that those in the second invited group were worthy. Is God making judgments? And if it were us, would we wonder whether we are in the first group or the second group? Are we worthy or are we unworthy? And would we be nervous and fear that when God judges us, that He judges us in the same way that we judge other people? More often than not, our judgments of others are judgments of exclusion. What if it's just the opposite with God? What if God's judgment on our lives is one of grace, one of acceptance, and one of invitation, a judgment of inclusion? If that's true, then what separates or distinguishes us or the first invited guests from the second? The difference isn't that one was more deserving than the other. The first invited guests were the recipients of God's invitation and favor, but so were the second. And so was the man who showed up without a wedding robe. They were all invited. They were all favored, and none of them had done anything to earn or deserve that invitation. It was just given. And if that's true for them, then it's true for us. The difference isn't that the king likes one group more than the other. His sole motivation is to share his banquet. He wants everyone to join and celebrate and be a part of the kingdom and his life. Both groups were given the same opportunity. So if it's true for them, it's true for us. The difference isn't that some guests are good and others are bad. There's no distinction or judgment made based upon the behavior or the beliefs or the attitudes or even their morals. Just the opposite. With the second round of invitation, the king sends his servants into the main streets with the instructions to invite everybody that you find. And they did. They went out into the streets and they gathered all that they found, both good and both bad. That's probably not the kind of social life most of us live, to offer or give to one another or to receive one another in that way. But the parable is talking about God's kingdom and not ours. So what is it? What's the difference between those who are not worthy and those who were? There's only one thing that separates the first invited guests from the second invited guests, and that's that they were present. The second invited guests showed up. The first invited guests did not. The wedding hall was filled with guests, the first ones and the second ones, but the guests wouldn't come. And that's the only difference between the two groups. Which makes me think that the key to our life in God is just to show up, to be present. And that's a lot easier said than done. To be present is more difficult work. Think of how difficult it is to be present to another person. It means establishing the other person as our priority. It means seeing them for who they are and not who we want them to be or think that they should be. It means really listening to what they say and not just what we hear or what we want to hear. It means letting go of our agendas and distractions. And it means bringing and offering all that we are and all that we have. If we're not doing that with others, we're probably not doing that with God. Instead, we tend to go our separate ways, doing our own thing. We're too busy, or too tired, or too distracted. There's work to be done and money to be made. We make light of another one's life and what is being offered. And if we don't earn it or work for it, we assume it has no value. We think that we get what we pay for, and we're convinced we have better things to do and better places to go. And that's what the first invited group did. What they didn't realize, and what we sometimes don't realize, is that there is no life outside the banquet, the kingdom. To show up and to be present is to be worthy before God. It's that simple, and it's that difficult. We don't earn or prove our worthiness as a prerequisite to entering the banquet. We show up and we be present, and we discover for ourselves the worthiness. God has always known about us. That's when our lives begin to change. But what about the guy who showed up without a wedding robe? The wedding clothes were to represent the righteousness needed to enter God's kingdom, the total acceptance in God's eyes that Christ gives every believer. Christ has provided this garment of righteousness for everyone, but each person must choose to put it on in order to enter the King's banquet. It represents an open invitation, but we must be ready. But something else was missing. The parable says about the man that he was speechless. It was as if he wasn't really there. Jesus is reminding us that there are times when we show up, but we're not really present. Our body is there, but we've left the room. So I wonder, if this man had said something, anything, what if he had just made his presence known? What if he had said, I was hungry, I smelled the food, I trusted you to feed me. I was lonely, I saw the lights on, and I trusted you to take me in. I was sad and grieving. I heard music and laughter. I trusted you to share your joy. I was empty. I saw abundance, and I trusted you to fill me. And I was dying. I saw the door was open, and I trusted you to give me life. What if he had just said any one of those things like that, any 1,000 things he could have thought of? It might have been enough. He would have shown up with all that he was and all that he had, and he would have been present. Then the king might have said to him, my dear friend, I'm so glad you received my invitation. I'm so glad that you're here. And instead of being speechless, he would have been present with the words that he thought to say. Had that happened, he could have been thinking pure and admirable thoughts to say to the king. A popular proverb today says, you are what you eat. But according to Jesus, you are what you think. What if you stopped and you took a personal inventory on a regular daily basis and asked yourself, what have I been thinking about? Because what we think and what we say determines much of our life. We all know people who insist on thinking negative thoughts and speak negatively, and they continue to dwell on things that have been the way they've been hurt in the past. They live in bitterness and they feel defeated. Others fill their heads with good thoughts, and that in turn produces a good life. Again, you are what you think. People would say, but I don't have any control over what I think. I just think when I think. Nobody can control thoughts. But according to God, that's wrong. We do have a great deal of control over what we think. We can choose what we think about, just as we can make any other choice in life. That's precisely what the passage in Philippians is talking about. Here God gives 8 questions to ask about what we think, and to serve as a filter to let good thinking in and keep bad thinking out. These are things that we should think about for positive thinking, things that will build us up and not tear us down. Paul writes, "Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." Whatever is true. Before you open up your mouth, are you speaking the truth? Nothing dishonest, untrue, or unreliable. Whatever is noble. The word means honorable, worthy of reverence. Do you ponder things that are noble and of serious purpose? Or do you dwell on the frivolous and trivial? Whatever is right. This means in conformity in God's standards. Not is it right in my eyes, or is it right in others' eyes? Is it right in God's eyes? If your thoughts were broadcast for the world to hear, would you be ashamed and embarrassed if others knew what you were thinking? Or what would they think of you? Whatever is pure. This has to do with morality and means morally undefiled, clean and holy. Impure thoughts are the easiest to do something about, but they're also the easiest to let run wild. When this happens, we need to purposely choose to think about something else. Whatever is lovely. It literally means love towards. Does it call forth love? Whatever is admirable. This means to speak well of someone. These are the things that are fit for God to hear. But to make it simple, we need to think good thoughts about people. I'm convinced that this is one of the most important steps towards general happiness in life. With just about everybody that we know, there are things to criticize and there's things to commend. Aim at always thinking the best of people. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Think good and admirable things about them and try to say good things about them. Because your results will be wonderful. Instead of having to gossip and criticize and put people down to lift ourselves up, we start to plant and we grow good and admirable thoughts. We feel better about ourselves, and we feel the benefits of kindness and the joy of loving others. Try not to be one of those nasty, sharp, critical folks. We need to think the best of others. Think to yourself, whenever you think anything, is this admirable? And whatever is excellent. This is a good thought check. We often spend a lot of time thinking about things that really don't matter over the long haul. We need to frequently ask ourselves, what difference will this make in eternity? Or for that matter, what difference will it make next week? Is it something that God would approve? All of us fight the tendency to let our minds dwell on the negative. How do you change your mind? Well, analyze what you put in it. If you put garbage in your mind, garbage is what you'll get out. This touches so many areas of our life because we receive input from so many other sources. Think about the music that you listen to, or the movies that you watch, or the videos that you rent, the radio stations that you turn on in the morning, the books that you read, and the shows that you watch on TV. And what about the conversations that you have, the places that you go on the weekend, your secret habits, your daydreams, your hobbies, and what you do when you're away from home? One thing that I have tried to stop doing is that I don't put anything in my head that is disturbing or negative, and it'll have a negative effect on me. Years ago, I would watch shows like Dateline or Unsolved Mysteries. Now, I realized after that I would be thinking about them long afterwards, and it would disturb me. So I stopped putting that information in my head. Now, I'm not saying that these are bad shows. I'm just saying that for me, they're bad because I let it disturb me afterwards. And I don't need anything in my mind that makes me feel uneasy. And at one time, I used to read murder mysteries, and I don't do that anymore, too. I especially don't like any kind of shows or movies that have anything to do with satanic thoughts and images, because that's something I never want in my mind. A verse in 2 Corinthians says that we should take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. And in order to do that, we've got to look at the source of our input. What goes in must come out. And sooner or later, our thoughts translate into reality. Think of it this way. If we think angry thoughts, then we will probably speak angry words. And if we dwell on our problems, they will soon overwhelm us. And if we feel like a victim, we may soon become one. But on the other side, if we focus on the truth, we will speak the truth. And if we seek out lovely things, our lives will be lovely to others. And if we dwell on that which is right, those things that are wrong will no longer attract us. If we think on pure things, we will become pure. And if we search for higher things, we will elevate our own lives. This is God's prescription for believers, to think on these things, to focus on the good, the poor, the true, the holy, the right, and the lovely. Find those things that will lift you up and think on them and ask, is this the kind of thoughts that is worthy of praise, especially from God? Let me read the last verse of Matthew again. For many are invited, but few are chosen. Now think about the things in your life that you say and do, and ask yourself, am I going to be one of the chosen ones? Have I shown up? Am I present? And now let me read the last verse of Philippians again, which says, keep on doing the things you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. We all want that peace. I know I do. When we don't have peace and when it's constant turmoil in our lives, it is all determined about what we think about. So if you truly do want peace in your life, ask God to help you with what you think about. Ask God to help you receive and tap into His power. It's always right there waiting for us. And then keep on doing the things that you've learned and be present and show up and be grateful for that invitation. Thanks be to God. Amen.